Lifeboat Live. We have 4 simple rules. Number 1, we don't discuss politics. Ever. Number 2, this is not a religious channel, and while you might hear people say, God bless you, or I'm going to pray for you, or I wouldn't have gotten through this without my faith, that's fine. What's not fine is to say, my God is better than your God, or here's why you're not getting into heaven. It's not going to fly. Number 3, we believe wholeheartedly if you can't control your tongue, then you can't control your life. So while on board, there's not going to be any cursing in the live chat. Period. And number 4, there is no room for mean people on the lifeboat. Because we discuss very sensitive things from people's past in our group setting, we got to protect those people. The only way they feel confident and comfortable discussing those things is in an environment that is free of trolls and mean people. So if you're a mean person or you're a troll, we're going to block you for life. And if your account happens to be less than 24 hours old, we're probably a little suspicious right from the word go. Why? Well, because there are people in this world who enjoy being cruel solely for the sake of being cruel. It's not going to fly here. But if you're here because you're trying to get sober and live your best life, then you might find that the lifeboat is just that, a lifeboat. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and we will see you on deck.
Hey, it's Wednesday, people. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and you are on the lifeboat. This is my favorite day of the week. You know that. This is the time when Niall and I get together and we just have a talk. And been looking forward to this since the last one that we did, because the feedback we get from these, honestly, I get more feedback from this than any of the other shows, and that's always exciting for me. And I want to do a shout out to all of the new folks. We got a lot of new crew on the lifeboat, and that's awesome too. The more it grows, the more people we can help, and that's really why we're here. Niall, good to see you, my brother.
Fantastic to be here. Thank you for inviting me back yet again.
I love it. We're gonna keep going as long as we can drag you here. Before we get rolling, I know that you and I had spoken, and you felt like maybe there was something you wanted to clarify from one of the previous times that you were on, and I figured before we get rolling, give you the floor. Go ahead, clarify away.
Well, yes, and it has to do with medical advice versus medical intervention. I felt the last time I was on the show, it was only in subsequent shows this actually stuck in my brain. But at the time, I'm not sure whether I used the word medical advice or medical intervention for alcoholics who are, trying to get sober. And then, a couple of shows after that, I listened to them in retrospect, and I was thinking to myself, specifically about the time that you had to go into lockdown in your cell, and you had no choice but to, go through withdrawals. And a couple of people came on the boat and the show, and they were talking. Once you get past the first 2 or 3 days, and then I'm thinking to myself, maybe my advice about just go to your doctor and he'll give you stuff to get off, withdrawals, or help you with withdrawals, was slightly misleading. So I'd like to rectify what I said on that show, and it's nothing dramatic, and it's. I have to tell it in the way of telling a story, We have this saying in Ireland that there's only 3 types of honesty that you need, You need an honest accountant, you need an honest priest, and you need an honest doctor. That's the only 3 types of honesty that you need. Right. So my relationship with my doctor was a long one. Right, and he was an old school doctor. He's passed away now, and I miss him a hell of a lot because he was just so on the button when it came to medical advice. And of course, I was in and out of his room countless times, begging for this, begging for that. I had the shakes. I need to, and he was always very stoic, very deadpan. He used to wear this fantastic three-piece tweed suit with a waistcoat, and he would lean back in his leather chair, and he'd join his hands together and say, "Well, Niall, what's going on today?" You know, he knew the story. You know. He says, "Okay, well, I'll just take your vital signs." I'm like, "Your vital signs? Yeah, well, your blood pressure is slightly elevated, but your heartbeat is just probably likely. It's nothing to worry about." And I'd be like, "Can you give me something? Can you give me something?" Right? And this will remind me, Tommy, in case you forget, because this will be a story, right? There is a direct correlation between alcohol addiction and prescription meds with alcoholics. Right. Okay, they go hand in hand. I don't know. I don't think I mentioned that before, but they go hand in hand. Right? And he'd be like, "No, you're fine. I'm not." And he'd be like, "Please give me some Xanax, give me some Valium, just take me down." No, no, you're fine. Your vital signs are fine. You're not in any danger. How's your stomach? It's okay. Okay, I can give you something for your stomach. Whatever, you know, not, you know, you're fine. You're fine. You know, stop drinking. No, stop drinking. Right? And this went on for a few years. I would arrive occasionally, you know, every 6 months or so. "Oh, doc, please, I'm in bits. I need. And he'd be like, you know, stoically with his hands crossed across his belly with his same suit, you know, very stoic, very deadpan. "Okay, let's take our vital signs." "No, you're fine. Have you not stopped drinking yet?"
Quit drinking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And he says, "No, yeah. Can you give me this? Can you something to help me sleep? Can you give me something to, you know?" No, you don't need it. You know, you need to stop drinking. You know, and that was his role, and he was sticking to it. I hated him for it. I hated him for it. Right? But that's medical advice, right? Right there. That's medical advice from a very, very, very good doctor, right? When it came to medical intervention, that was my final meeting, and it just kind of coincided with he died soon afterwards. But it was my final meeting with him in 2015. I arrived in his office, and he was still there in the leather back seat with the
three-piece suit.
Three-piece suit. "Hello, Niall. What can I do for you?" And I was like, "I have to start drinking, and I need some help." And he looked at me and he says, "Okay. When was the last time you drank?" "Yesterday." "Okay. And how much did you have to drink yesterday?" "Well," and I was so honest with the guy. It was incredible how honest I was. This is like life or death. I knew it was.
Yeah.
You know, I knew it was. He knew it was as well. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't going to show his hand until I showed mine. And I said, yesterday I had, I think, somewhere between 10 and 12 500 milliliter cans of beer. It was like, you know, 2 6-packs of beer, like big cans.
Yeah.
2 liters cider, you know, and a half a bottle of vodka.
Good Lord.
And I've never seen it. Normally, it's only twice his eyes kind of widened during that entire situation, but his eyes widened when I said that. And he said, "Well, I'm very surprised that you're still standing."
Yeah.
You know, and I also know that you've told me the truth. So he said, "I'm going to take some information off you. I'm going to take your blood pressure, right?" And you have to think around. It's a true story. You have to go through all these, you know, situational, because this is how exactly how it occurred. And he pumped up the thing and let it go. And then that was the second time his eyes widened. And he took it off my arm very slowly. And he says, "I'm just going to take your pulse now." And my heart was going. And he was like, "Okay." And he sat back down in the chair. And he said, "No, we have 2 options here. I can send you straight away over to accident and emergency, but I know you won't stay there because right now you're in a bad way. He says you are on the verge of full-blown delirium tremens. In other words, he said, first time he never spoke as much as he did at that exact precise moment. You could have a heart attack right now.
Sure. Seize whatever.
You could have a full-blown seizure right now. But I know if I send you over to A&E, you won't stay there. Because you can't. Because you're going to be like, because what's happened is you've with that amount of alcohol that you've taken in over this period, especially in the last few days, you've suppressed your neurological system to such an extent that it's just now exploding. So anything can happen, right? I'm not even going to test you for your liver functions. I'm not going to do anything, right? I'm not going to send you to A&E because I know you won't stay there. You won't be able to stay there. So what we're going to do is this, and this is the best advice I ever got. He says, I'm going to give you some medication to help you all
Valium.
out over the next, Valium. It's either Xanax or Valium in this country, diazepam or Xanax. And he says, I'm going to give you a dose that can taper off over 10 days. Usually it's 7, but in your case, you need 10, right? And he said, Niall, I'm not just going to give you this prescription and let you go down to the pharmacy and fill it, because I know what you're going to do.
And eat it all at once.
Yes. So what you do is there's a pharmacy next door, give them the prescription or go closer to where you live. He asked me, how close is your nearest pharmacy? I said 2-minute walk. Okay, maybe it's better that you go to your closest pharmacy so that you're not kind of locked into one pharmacy that you have to get a bus to or whatever. So he said, listen, go back home, go down to your local pharmacy, give them this. They will give you what you need for today. Okay?
He was a genius.
Tomorrow, you go down and they will give you what you need for today, right? The next day, you go down and they will give you what you need for today. And he tapered me off over 10 days and it saved my life.
Literally.
Now to me, that is a brilliant doctor. That is a brilliant doctor, And so that's what I mean when I say medical advice is like, no, it's okay. As opposed to medical intervention. There's 2 opposing things there, right? Medical intervention, ethically, every doctor is bound to medically intervene when they have to. Medical advice is like, you're drinking too much, you're doing this, you're doing, blah, 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 blah. That's medical advice, If you don't stop this, you're going to be dead in a year. That's medical advice. Medical intervention is something completely different. And that's the reason I wanted to tell you that full story, is that that is medical intervention. But that doesn't mean to say it's kind of like a green card to everybody who suffers from anxiety, who is maybe addicted to prescription medication, and go in and say, hey, Niall said on the boat, if I'm suffering from anxiety, I can go in and get a prescription and, no worries, I can get more pills. No, that's not what I meant. And I'm not sure it was taken up that way. I don't think it was taken up that way.
No, I think, but I think it's probably better that it was clarified.
I think absolutely vitally important that it's clarified. Withdrawal symptoms, and you touched on this exact topic in the last couple of shows when you talk about withdrawals. There's withdrawals and there's withdrawals, right? There's kind of like you have the shakes for a few days and anxiety and the sweats and you can't sleep and you have nightmares, but you're not in any danger. When my doctor made the call to give me that phased and tapered prescription medication, he knew if he
That you were
if
a
he did
dead
that,
man. Yeah.
without it. So that is the distinction I want to make, that you can't. Don't anybody think that you can walk into a doctor and say, listen, I'm feeling a bit rough around the edges, I'm hungover, I feel a bit anxious, they're not going to give you what you want. And this kind of leads me to my final point, and then Tommy, you can jump in and give me a reaction to what I said, and I hope I covered everything, because I was very, very passionate about this during the week. Oh, and there was a couple of other things before you do. Um, uh, it's extremely important to understand that doctors, good doctors, are, this is what they do, they have a certain role to fulfill. They're not there as a dispensary, Of course, some doctors do, but
Yeah, they usually end up in prison.
they usually end up in prison, Years ago, they used to do that, Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
whatever. We used
Pill
to call
mills.
it, we used to call it the smarty party,
Yeah.
Smarty party, yeah. Yeah. But these days, they don't do that. It's much more um, streamlined and much more severe and much more honest. Let's face it, I mean, if you're at that stage where your life is in danger, a good doctor who's got your back will support you all the way. But so I want to clarify that, because what I said in the video, I hope it didn't come across wrong, but I hope I've explained it now, is that medical advice is vital. Medical advice. If you're thinking of giving up drinking and you're like this, medical advice is what you need to do, not medical intervention necessarily. Medical
Right.
advice. The doctor will decide whether it needs to be intervened or not. And the last thing is, the reason that brought that home to me is in your last couple of videos, you said a couple of things about, well, I think I mentioned them already, about, when you were locked up and you had to go through, you had no choice but to go through cold turkey. You had no choice. But I'm sure if you were having a seizure on the cell floor, something would have happened, and again, if you're an alcoholic who's been drinking very, very heavily, I mean, very, very heavily for a very, very long time, and your heart is like this, and your head is, and you're sweating, and there's a good chance you need some medical advice, right? And every doctor will decide at that stage whether it's just advice or intervention. So
Yeah,
that's
and
it.
and I think that's key. And this is one of those subjects on the boat that, every once in a while I feel like there are things I say too much, and then there are things that if I say them every single show for the rest of the time that I do this, I'm not saying them too much. There are people who will argue this point until the end of time, and they'll talk to you about heroin addicts who die in withdrawal. The truth of the matter is there is always another pre-existing condition of some kind. Withdrawing off of heroin isn't going to kill you. It's going to make you wish you were dead. But, more often than not, because I had a habit that was just like very few people. I mean, Keith Richards would have told me to pump the brakes, and I can't tell you how many times I went, cold turkey, and it was absolutely awful every single time. But you can't do that on alcohol, and you can't do that on benzodiazepines. Those are the two that really jump out as. Now, that's not to say your best case scenario is always to talk to a doctor before you quit, because there are things they can give you that is going to make the process of getting off of opiates a whole lot better, and it's going to really increase your chance for success. So I always think that everybody should, discuss it with a doctor. And it's like you said, I've always been of the firm belief that the two people you don't lie to in this world, if you're smart, is your doctor and your lawyer, right? Mm-hmm. Because those are the two people that you really need their help. I was a guy that is, and many times in my life had to rely on both of those professions. And if you don't tell them the truth, when the truth comes out, you're screwed. Whether it's a lawyer or a doctor, either way, because once a doctor feels like you're lying to them or you're trying to work them, but it's like you said, you went in and you talked to this guy, and every time, yeah, we'll take your blood pressure. No, you're fine. You need to quit drinking. But if you go in there and you're honest with them, the first time that I remember talking to a doctor about the whole getting sober, and the doctor said, well, how much heroin are you using? And I said, somewhere between 6 to 7 grams a day, unless something really great happens, and then maybe 9 or 10 if I'm not paying for it, or if there's an easy hookup or whatever. And it was the same kind of thing. His eyes got this big. And truthfully, this was a medical doctor who said to me, "You got to be S-ing me." And I said, "No." And he said, "How long have you been doing that?" I said, "About as long as I can remember. I'm going on two and a half decades anyway doing this." And the conversation changed, because he said, the next line, "I've been doing this for so long, but my next line is always, now come on, tell me the truth." He said, "But I don't feel like I got to tell you to tell me the truth. I feel like you did. You don't want to lie to a medical professional. And the more you tell them, even if they're not giving you something like Suboxone, if that's a route you don't want to go or whatever, they can give you things that are going to lower your heart rate a little bit. Like even in prison, they're not going to give you anything. So if they find out that you're in acute detox from opiates, they'll just give you a couple of heart pills, things that are just going to slow your heart rate down a little bit, because chances are, like you said, you said your heart's going like Neil Peart on a drum solo, and it's just super, super unhealthy, and they'll slow that down. But when it comes to alcohol and benzos, there are people on this planet that will still give people advice like, "Well, you can do it. You just got to be tough." And that kind of advice kills people.
Yes.
It kills people. It has nothing to do with tough. It has nothing to do with intestinal fortitude and all of the other things that you hear. If, like your last day, I mean, good Lord, you drank enough. If I drank what you had drank on that last day today, I'd be dead. I'm not kidding you. I mean, it would kill me. You have to, and when people hear this, I think sometimes people whose drug of choice wasn't alcohol, they don't realize, same with me and the heroin, there are addicts who say to me, "There's no way you could do that." I mean, it's just so much heroin. I didn't do that day one. This was 10 to 15 years into just doing this every single day. It's like the alcohol.
More.
Yeah.
Can
I watched
I
the
add
guy
something?
drink. Sure.
Of
Absolutely.
course, Mark.
Yeah,
Jump
yeah.
in.
I don't mean to jump in the middle here, but I got something that real life happened to me with this whole situation. When I first got help, guys, I went to a rehab facility, and they told me I couldn't make it in because I would not die from opiate withdrawal. So I came back home, and most of you guys know my story, and if you don't, I'm not going to go into my whole full story, but I went home, and on the way home, I got 2 fists of vodka, and I was just going to pass out through the withdrawals. Well, because I didn't drink, I ended up with alcohol poisoning, ended up at my local hospital. They put me on the psych ward because they had nowhere else to put me, gave me phenobarbital, which, if anybody knows what that's, a blood pressure medicine. It's supposed to help calm your nerves, but it didn't give me anything else. And then now the insurance took me over at the rehab place because alcohol is involved, and I was not even an alcoholic. That's
exactly.
And I say all that because the fact that I got alcohol poisoning should hammer home how dangerous this is.
Yes. And as you said, Mark, there's a crossover here between alcohol, prescription medications, very closely. For people who are very heavily addicted to alcohol, their relationship with prescription medication is very close, and that includes codeine. Codeine, painkillers, Solpadeine in this country. I'm not sure what they call them in the States. Probably the same thing. Solpadeine, soluble tablets. I used to just drink like 5 of them in a glass. So codeine, and then you're withdrawing from codeine. And then if you do happen to find a doctor who's a bit dodgy and he gives you some Xanax, you'll swallow them all. Or some Valium if you can get them, or if a friend has, some Valium, you'll swallow them all. So this is a kind of a segue. It's not really a segue, but it's like a bridge between alcohol and the drug world that is real. Alcoholics and the drug world, that is their connection is through prescription medication, which they will abuse at every turn.
Exactly.
They might not snort cocaine, or
Right.
inject heroin, but the prescription medication an alcoholic would go for every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So
And I
Yeah.
think, with opiates, it becomes that too. I think that, very often, I remember there was a time in my life where, if I was in your house, the first thing I did in every house I ever went to is I said, you care if I use the bathroom real quick?
mm,
That was just standard operating procedure because I was going to raid the medicine chest because, most air quote normal people, you get tooth out or you do something at the dentist or you hurt yourself, they write you a prescription for pain meds. The average person eats 3 or 4 of them. It gets them through those, first 4 or 5 days or whatever, and they stick them in the med chest. Or they were really stressed out for a period of time, so they get, a prescription for Valium, and normal people, air quotes, they take 4 or 5 of them, and then they get back on an even keel. Put them in the medicine. But I used to go and hit every medicine chest in every house, and it got to a point where I would say, hey, is it cool if I use your restroom? And I'd have guys go, now you can go out back though. You know what I mean? Like, you use the slide door. They didn't want me anywhere near,
yes, yeah,
anything
exactly.
in their house because it was, sort of became that kind of
yeah.
a thing, But yeah, there's definitely a lot of crossover. And I think that with, with people who drink, that's really an issue because, and I've beat this to death, but I will continue to do so. There really isn't a difference between Valium and booze in terms of your brain. You know what I mean? Like your brain thinks it's the same thing. You don't get the same, maybe euphoric of the whole ritual and all of that, but what it's going to do and the order it's going to do it and all of that. It's identical. It's why, when a guy goes into jail, and every addict knows this. All of the, the heroin addicts know that when you get there and they say, are you doing any drugs? If you say, well, I'm on heroin, they give you Advil and Maalox, and they lock you in a cell and say, best of luck. That's the the heroin detox protocol. But if you go in there and you say, yeah, I've been, taking about 25, 10 milligram Valiums a day. Well, now they got to worry about you, right? Because that can kill you. And what they would do is they would put you on the alcohol or benzo detox protocol, and they give you, Valium. So heroin addicts would always tell them that when they got there, because at least get enough Valium to hopefully get through the first, 4 or 5 days of the, of the kick. And that was,
which is a brilliant segue into exactly what I wanted to talk to you about in the second half of the show.
okay, cool.
If you're incarcerated, and I've heard horror stories. I've had one or two friends who have been locked up who had an alcohol addiction or whatever, and they had to sit shaking in their cell, and there was no doctor that came in. They were given a rudimentary medical examination, which was, it didn't really go into detail. I'm not even sure whether it was entered down seriously. You have to keep an eye on this guy because he might go into full delirium tremens,
Right.
Or in the case of severe heroin withdrawal, you keep an eye on this guy because he might have a seizure or he might die. I suppose the question I want to ask you is that in society, I think there's a lot to be learned from withdrawal. There's a lot that is misunderstood about withdrawal. Now, you can explain that from the point of view of being incarcerated, but just in everyday life, there's a lot to be learned about exactly what withdrawal is and what it does to the body, and how you can die in a second. I think, as far as I've been able to read, you mentioned Hawkins, the guy from Foo Fighters that died the other day. Just one of a long line of rock stars,
Ton of them. Yep.
And I think the way it works with these various drugs is it attacks the respiratory system more so than the nerves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but that doesn't mean it's still withdrawal,
Yeah.
But with alcohol, it's the nervous system that it is affected. With drugs, it tends to be the respiratory system. Would I be right?
Yeah, these guys, and that's what the overdoses are. Is that traditionally, like if you look at the laundry list that this guy had in his system, almost almost half of them are by definition respiratory depressants. So if you take Valium, it slows down your respiration. Just does that to everybody. It is a respiratory depressant. If you take any benzodiazepine, or any opiate rather, it's also a respiratory depressant. When you stack two on top of another, it also then relaxes the body to the point where, most people are familiar with watching a heroin addict nod out. And they get to the point of relaxation to where they nod out, the throat closes, and they're so relaxed that they never stop breathing again. And, if anybody else in the real world would go, and sort of do that thing, but it's never really, people get a misconception that the heart explodes or, most overdoses on opiates, it's suffocation. You just stop breathing. And
what you said there is exceptional. It cuts out your ability, if you get suffocated, instinctually, if you're underwater, for example, you will instinctually, go up and gasp for air. Yeah. But with these drugs, that kind of cuts that out. So even though you're suffocating, you don't have that impulse to breathe, which
Correct.
is impulse to breathe is cut off more or less.
Exactly.
Which is very, very, very scary if you think
it
about
really
it.
is, isn't it? And what's even worse, Niall, is I can't tell you how many times people overdose and die in a room with 6 people. We get this idea that it's a guy, he's alone at the house and there's nobody there to help him. I can't tell you how many stories I'm aware of personally, where a guy overdosed sitting on a couch and suffocated in a room where 8 to 10 people were having conversations and laughing and doing all that. There's not going to be thrashing. It's not the movies. Blood isn't going to start pouring out of the person's mouth and all the things.
They think he's just nodded off.
They think the guy's asleep.
Yeah.
And what I would tell anybody, if you're listening to this and you're still in that lifestyle and you see somebody that looks like they're asleep, go over and give them a shake.
Yes.
And really all it becomes is keeping them breathing. You know what I mean? Like if somebody, I've brought more people back from the dead than you can possibly imagine, but it just becomes a matter of making them really uncomfortable. You take a knuckle like this and you rub it on a person's sternum as hard as you can from top to bottom. So the doctors do. It's called a sternum rub. You go back and forth and it's just, it's terrible, but it gets them to do that at first breath. And it's like anything else. Once that first one comes in, it's like jump starting the car. Now the person will start breathing again because they're conscious, and you smack them around a little bit and you talk to them and hey, you with me, Niall? You with me? But so oftentimes it just looks like, I've seen him go out like this 100 times, when Chris Farley overdosed, the girl who was with him at the time,
well, she left him on the floor.
Yeah,
she left him on the floor.
Thought he was sleeping. Left him right on the floor. Walked out.
Yeah. And just to hammer the whole alcohol thing and the benzo thing home just one more time here, and I won't say nothing else. You guys can do what you need to do.
You're good.
But
no, Mark.
I was
talk away, please.
Okay. Yeah, because when I was in rehab, when they finally took me back over there, we would have a group all the time, right? But they kept the men and women separate. So,
right.
and that's what they do. It's just what's going to happen if you go to those facilities. It's just normal. But anyway, one time a day, they would bring everybody into the same room, women and men. There was like 40 or 50 of us. And, we're up against the wall in these chairs. Well, one woman was coming in every day in a wheelchair. And, she ended up sitting next to me a couple days or what have you. But the third day she came in there, she didn't look right. And I'm like, in her drug of choice, she was an alcoholic and benzos. That's what she did, right? And that's why I'm talking about this. She fell she had a seizure right there in the chair, fell on the floor and died right in front of all of us. And this was with medical help, guys.
Yes.
Okay? This is what I'm trying to say. This is how important it is to understand the gravity of when me and Tommy and Niall's now saying, and he understands it too. Me and Tommy say it, we've been saying this for a long time. Alcohol withdrawal, benzo withdrawal is the most dangerous thing without medical help. Please, please, please get help. Don't do it on your own.
And as I said, Mark, the combination of the two, alcohol and benzos. I think you guys call it benzos.
Yep.
Yeah.
is like detrimental. And it's like for the last 2 or 3 days, I'll be honest with you, Tommy, I was like, I have to get this message home. I really have to get this message home about withdrawals because it is so serious.
Yeah.
And depending on how many stations you've gone on the railroad track, um, you know, but if you're right at the last stop, like me, I mean, it's that's why I was talking about medical intervention is so essential, and it's so essential to be honest about all of these things. But some of it, I suppose, is down to the professional involved. Sometimes you can get bad advice. Like I think that's what Mark was alluding to. There was a woman there, benzos and booze, and nobody realized that she died right in front of. Somebody should have caught on to that fact. A week before, and she should have been closely monitored, whatever. So that scares me about all of these ideas that we float around about one day at a time, and you will get through this, and don't worry, the first week is and it is, but that's fine if you're at like a certain stage, but if you're at end stage, as I said earlier on, you should always get medical advice immediately. But medical intervention is essential if you're at end stage, because death is it's there. It's just like staring you in the face. Again, I sometimes feel like I'm on the show and it's always a downer, but it's not. It's
Don't worry about that, Niall, because honestly, what we talk about here is that's what it is, guys. I mean, and me and Tommy try to sprinkle in some positivity.
I'm just trying to be honest. Trying to be honest. Yeah. And again, I don't take over the whole show with this, but I think I've clarified what I said or what I meant to say at the beginning of the show, Tommy. Is that good?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I saw a comment in the comment section that said, all this talk about anxiety meds and alcohol really makes me sort of want it. And I'd love for you to weigh in on this too. But the people, and if anything you hear on the lifeboat or anything else causes that kind of a trigger, I think the first response really needs to be to take a real good look at where you are. And I'm not picking on anybody. I promise you I'm not. But we don't talk about, let me tell you how much fun this was, right? We're talking about the, as you said, sort of the downer end of this. We're talking about how, this stuff just destroys lives and kills people and what it does. If that's making you sort of harken back to that, you're probably in a place that you need to talk to some people, get it out, because that it's one of the reasons that NA was never a place I could go to, because to me, the conversations there really kind of glorified the drugs. Maybe it was just the room I went to. I'm not bad mouthing it across the board. You understand? But I would go in there and guys would get up and say, on the last day that I did it, I did 16 grams and we were doing lines this big. And like, he would get into the story and I'd be thinking to myself, he's describing this like it was the time of his life. He was describing this like he just, these horror stories, like he was loving it. And then, at the very end, he would do boy, and I'm glad that's not a part of my life anymore. And I thought, he doesn't sound like he's glad that's not a part of his life. I try to, and I apologize if I'm triggering anybody with these conversations, but I really try to concentrate on, like withdrawal, for instance, is pretty ugly stuff. There's certainly not the glory end of these substances by any stretch of the imagination. But Niall, I also had another thing come up this week that I think I kind of find fascinating. And I almost, immediately thought, I'd like to know Niall's opinion on this. But I've been reading a lot about medical assisted treatment for people, not just for opiates, but for alcohol as well. And, there's a lot of people that believe you're supposed to cold turkey it. You're supposed to white knuckle it and go through that. And, you're not really sober if you're taking this, or you're not really sober if you're taking that, or whatever the case may be. But there's been a big push for a lot of science that says, for some people who are addicted to a substance for such a long period of time, that they kind of need a medication to get them to zero, kind of like, the Suboxone thing. And there's a lot of weight right now talking about this naltrexone for alcoholics. And the idea is not that, you're not catching a buzz, you're not doing any of that, but what it's supposed to do is, by eliminating that craving that's, such a huge part of the addict's life, it basically gets them to level. Because the report I was reading was fascinating. And what they said is, if a person is too long on a substance, they may never get back to level. They may wake up every day at -5, right? Whereas the normal person wakes up at 0. And they're looking at all of these different sort of treatments, not to keep somebody wasted or any of that, but to try to keep somebody at 0. And I found it fascinating. Like, to me, the concept that, we could party to the point where we change our brain chemistry to such a level that there may be intervention that needs to be looked at medically. Yeah. What's your view on this?
My view on this is, I haven't read that particular report, but decades and decades of research have kind of come up with scientifically very little that can be done with an alcoholic's brain function. No, I think that scientifically, my approach, I haven't heard of this particular drug or that report that you're referring to, but my approach to alcoholics in late stages, they don't want to get drunk. They don't want to feel high. They just want to stop panicking. They just want to get some kind of base level that they can start from.
Right. Make it stop.
Yeah. I think a lot of scientists have been identifying that as the source of problem. It's not how do you make an alcoholic, feel drunk when he's not drunk. It's not about that. No alcoholic in the late stages wants to feel drunk. They just want to feel calm.
Right.
They just want to feel calm. Yeah. So, okay, you can fill them full of benzos or whatever it is, but that's only exacerbating the problem. So scientifically, how do you feel them? How do you make an alcoholic kind of get to the stage where I'm at? And I can say, well, it's okay to be like this. It's okay to be like this, rather than this or this,
Right.
And that's what they're trying to achieve through these medications. And if they can tap into that area of the brain that kind of makes you zero out, I think every alcoholic on the planet would be delighted and absolutely saved by that realization. Because for alcoholics, the biggest fear is reality and the nervous system explosion and the fear of withdrawals. And all of these things are like one big kind of crazy mess in your head. So scientifically, I think, and they've been working on this. I haven't read this particular report, but they've been working on this over the decades. How do we get an alcoholic's brain just to kind of go on a flat plane, and the flat plane is what we aspire to,
Right.
It's not down here, it's not up there. It's just give me a break.
Normal. We just like to be normal.
Just give my brain time to just,
You don't know how powerful that is when you say that.
Yeah.
Honestly, normal. That's just all everybody wants. When you get it, nobody wakes up wanting to be addicted, and that's just,
And I think that's probably one of the places, Niall, where there's just such similarity. Because when you say, in the late stages, they're not, you're not wanting to be to be drunk. It's not what you're shooting for. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine that's an addict and has been forever. And I was talking to him about how long he had been using, and he said, and I haven't been high in 15 years. He said, I haven't been, truthfully, nodding out and doing all of that and the stuff. He said, man, I don't get high. At this point, I'm, shooting up $200 a day to get just normal, to where I feel like I can function, but he said his exact quote was, I don't know if there's enough dope out there to get me high. Like that's really where he had gotten to. And I think that was probably what fascinated me so much on the whole concept is, oh, now eliminate the substance. And can you get back to, that base level? Is that something that, or do you believe that there are people who can damage the brain to the point where you can't, or there
Both.
are,
Both.
both.
I don't know whether you've heard the term wet brain.
Absolutely.
When you get wet brain, you're pretty much screwed.
You're toast. Yeah.
That's when your brain basically overloads. It's like short circuits, and
you're done at that.
And science it has been working very hard to deal with brain function as it relates to it. I actually only started really looking into this because of my own illness of multiple sclerosis, because it's kind of related to the nervous system as well. But when it comes to brain activity, when you're genetically, you're kind of predisposed to an activity in the brain which is completely abnormal to most people. That activity is all encompassing, and it's all about instant gratification. And Tommy, you've often talked about the reward center of the brain, all these kind of things. That's absolutely true. And we spend the rest of our lives as active addicts looking for that kind of what I used to call the zone. The zone. Right. Where everything is good. I'm kind of buzzed out. I'm buzzed out. And it goes away after a certain period of time, but you still chase it. You're just looking for that kind of Alice in Wonderland feeling, that you once had. Yeah, and that's what the doctors are trying to hone in on in the brain. Because if you can make an alcoholic stop chasing the Alice in Wonderland, stop chasing the rabbit down the hole, stop looking for this nirvana that doesn't exist, and they know it doesn't exist, and just let them just base level out, I think it would be a fantastic thing, absolutely fantastic thing.
Yeah.
But I'll check out that report after the show.
Yeah, well, you know what? I will send you the info on it. Yeah, on it now, because what there's no narcotic feeling to what they're giving people now. It really, with this naltrexone stuff, just works on the reward center of the brain is what it does, and it tries to so it's more akin to like a psych med than it is like a any kind of a psychotropic. It's more like a something that you would treat almost like depression. And truthfully, what it was designed for was to treat people who were addicted to opiates. And it was given as a long-term injection or a once-a-day orally that would make you sick if you did any opiates. That was what it was designed for. Now, it won't make you sick if you drink, but it turns off the reward center of the brain as it relates to any kind of alcohol. And the report said basically that over a period of time, the results that they were having with people was just phenomenal. And not just as a cessation, but as people would say, not only was I able to quit, but the cravings were gone. And that's really kind of the huge thing is that, and I know there's no magic bullet, people. Don't get me wrong. Suboxone's not a magic bullet either. All the Suboxone is going to do is get you to zero. And then you got to live life like every other air quote normal person in the world. You're not going to, like Niall said beautifully, you're looking for nirvana and it doesn't exist. You're not going to get it any more from Suboxone than you got it from heroin. What it's going to do though is just take away that inner craving, that voice. But all that does is get you to base camp. That gets you to level.
And that's where we step in,
Yeah.
That's where the group stuff. Yeah.
Which is exactly what we're trying to do, is to, as Tommy has eloquently put it so many times, we're just trying to get to base camp. And that's a very good analogy, but we're just trying to get to base camp. It's uncomfortable, it's cold, I can't breathe, but I'm not up there. I'm just getting ready, to climb that mountain.
Air's thin.
And there's a lot of cliches in there, but it's a lot of cliches, but they're absolutely true.
No question.
They're absolutely true. And I have this big thing, another cliche for you. I've told you this time and time again. You have to know where you were before you know where you're going. You know, and you have to completely understand where you were before you completely understand.
Yeah.
You can't just
come to grips with it. Yeah, come to grips with it.
Absolutely. You know, and it just makes life a lot easier once that eventually in your brain you kind of go, well, yeah, I think I'm on the right track here. Yeah, I'm neither happy nor sad, but I'm not meant to be. This is actually normality. You know,
Right.
You're neither happy nor sad. You have happy days, you have sad days.
Yeah.
For addicts, it's like if I have a sad day, oh my God, it's the end of the world. You know,
Right.
You have a happy day, hey,
right.
You know, you want to call everybody and say, oh, I'm feeling happy today. You know?
Once you get over the initial shock of it,
it's very much like bipolarism. It really is. You know,
absolutely.
It's really close to bipolarism. It feels the same. I can tell you that.
I want to call people up.
You know, and this is something also too, guys. That this is why this whole subject is why we talked about getting to zero, but this is also why Tommy was talking earlier about the drug not getting you to that high. His friend hadn't got high in 15 years. This is why fentanyl is the thing. It leads to bigger things. Okay, none of us, like I said before, we don't wake up in the morning, hey, I'm going to go take the strongest thing out there just so I can, just leave it all behind or whatever. Nobody ever says that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It just isn't that way. But I really think there's a whole other conversation, probably a whole other show on what I just said right there. You know,
absolutely.
Because
no question.
Your mind really gets there, and there's nowhere else to go. Now you can't get high, and you're just trying to stay normal. And we can talk about that next Wednesday. How about that? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean that, and I think it's one more perfect example of the things that as soon as you step on deck of the lifeboat, everybody here understands, and try explaining this to the outside world. Trying to explain to somebody who has never been in the same boat. Well, I'm not drinking because I'm trying to get drunk. I mean, you're watching me on my second fifth, but I'm not trying to get drunk. I'm just trying to feel normal here. That's as much as I was never an alcoholic. I know exactly what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Because I shot dope at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there were times I used to set an alarm for 4 o'clock so that I could do it that way, knowing when I woke up, I'd already be well, and I wouldn't have to wake up feeling like crap. Like that, there's no logic to that. But people on the boat go, yeah, no, I get that. I get that. You can't explain that to the real world. It's just another example.
And I think what we're doing here is, I think this is my fourth time here.
Yes.
In a strange way, in the lifeboat way, right? The lifeboat way, which is, I've always told you, is very unique. We're doing a kind of a step program. We're going from a beginning to an end.
No question.
Yeah, and
I would agree with that.
We're going to reach the spiritual aspect at some stage. We're going to talk about all those different aspects, but it's in the lifeboat way. It's in
free form.
Free form, and everything is kind of. I'm very much a believer in the karma kind of circle. Everything what goes around comes around. And it's fascinating to talk about all of these different aspects. Although at the beginning they can seem kind of depressing, and a little bit, oh my God, everything's, oh my God, you have to go through this and go through that. But
yes, you do.
Being sober is a beautiful life. It's a beautiful life.
It really is.
I'm not going to sit here and go, yay, and just leave it at that. Get sober, just get sober. It's great. You have to understand.
It's a process.
What that process is, and I think that's what the lifeboat is trying to do. And you, Tommy, and Mark are trying to do. And I'm just there to support you.
Well, yeah, but the thing of it is, you're doing a lot for us, Niall.
Yeah,
honestly.
You're doing a lot
really
more than you really are doing a lot more than just supporting us. And if you say something like that one more time, I'm just going to start forwarding you emails with names, and you'll, I'll tell you something. Just we'll do this real quick because I know we're at the end of the show here. Can Can you see the number of emails on there? Does that show up on that screen?
It's a lot.
It's like a red blob.
It's 4
I can't see.
digits. It's
Yeah.
4
Okay.
digits. So
Yeah.
Okay.
the number of people that have that send me emails talking about this series that we're doing. If
Yeah.
the next time you say I'm not doing much, I'm going to start sending them to you.
And by the way,
And you're
before
never
the
going to
show,
sleep.
by the way, before the show ends, I have to find out out of curiosity, the guy who knew about the lifeboat, what product was he trying to sell?
Okay. It's funny that, and I knew you were going to ask that. I swear as soon as you said it before you went. The product that he wanted the lifeboat to sell was a type of messaging service so that everybody could communicate with one another and do it in a more private fashion, which sounded perfectly lovely to me.
Yeah.
And I was actually thinking to myself, I could see being a show for this, and maybe helping the boat a little bit. We could buy a little advertising or something with it and get more people. And then about 3/4 of the way through his presentation, he said, and there's a money making aspect to it. At which point I went, take it easy, my friend.
Yep.
Too bad. You know what I mean? We were this close.
Yeah.
We're this close.
Yeah, but you know what, people, you didn't, you weren't privy to it, but Niall sent me there was a great message about me being a show for something that takes the smell of what your dog's done out of the carpet. And I got a great laugh out of that. The lifeboat brought to you.
I think I called it Squirt the Dirt. Squirt the Dirt.
It was Squirt the Dirt.
That's awesome.
Welcome to the live
Brought to you
show.
by Squirt the Dirt.
I'm just trying to promote.
And let the memes begin.
Yeah, it was.
Awesome.
I got a really good laugh out of that. I really did. But that brings us pretty close to the top of the hour, people. This has been another fine episode of Wednesdays with Niall. By the way, Niall, M. Hunt apparently does an incredible job of your voice. M. Hunt is a guy on the boat who is a
Voice actor.
he does voiceovers. So
I believe so. I'd be very
and he
curious
says-
to hear.
Oh, well, we're going to make sure that happens because I want to hear it as well. So I figured if I said it on the air, we got a better chance of figuring out a way to make it happen. But he said, "Oh, you should hear me do Niall." So I'm really
You have to
looking
bring him
forward
on.
to that.
That's
You have to
awesome.
And
say,
when I
you know.
said that, somebody in the comments section said something along the lines of Niall's voice is like butter. I can't remember if I'm misquoting that. I'm not missing it by much. So and I said, yeah, I agree. I like that. So all right, people.
Awesome.
Next week on Wednesday, we're going to be back here. We're going to be exploring some of the other intricacies of this journey that we call sobriety. And between today and tomorrow night at the same time, when we're back here, same bat time, same bat channel, well, almost same bat time. We'll be back at 6:00, our normal time. Reach out and try to save somebody, people. It's what we do. That's Niall. I am Captain Tommy Scoville on the other side of the glass.
Mark Wages.
And never fear, I got a cat in a basket. Good night, everybody.